There are royal mysteries, and then there are royal timelines that refuse to stay buried, stories that seem settled until one forgotten statement, one overlooked timestamp, or one historian's quiet observation suddenly forces the world to look again. And few stories in modern royal history have created more lingering questions than the day Prince Archie entered the world. Because on the surface, it looked simple. A royal baby had arrived. The son of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had been born. Congratulations flooded in from around the world. Palace officials smiled for cameras. Broadcasters celebrated what appeared to be a joyful new chapter for the monarchy, and for a few brief hours, everything seemed exactly as it should. But then, the timeline began to speak. And what it appeared to reveal would leave historians, royal correspondents, and longtime palace watchers asking a question that has never completely disappeared. Because according to official public records, Archie was born at 5:26 in the morning on May 6, 2019, at Portland Hospital in London, a time that would later appear on official documentation and be repeated across international reporting, and under normal royal protocol, that moment should have triggered a carefully choreographed sequence inside palace communications. With senior officials informed, press officers activated, and the public prepared for one of the monarchy's most symbolic announcements. That was how royal births had worked for generations. That was how trust was maintained. That was how history was documented. And yet on this morning, something appeared different. Because hours after that recorded birth time, reporters across Britain were still being told that Meghan had gone into labor, a statement that at first passed without question, because when Buckingham Palace speaks, the world usually listens, and for decades, palace announcements had been treated almost as official history in real time. But then journalists started comparing timestamps. Television producers checked their notes. Royal correspondents reviewed press emails. And slowly, quietly, one uncomfortable question began moving through royal newsrooms. If Archie had already been born, then why was the world being told something else? It was not online gossip that first raised concern. It was historians. It was veteran biographers. It was people who had spent decades studying how the monarchy communicates major family events, people who understood that inside palace life, timing is never random, language is never accidental, and public statements are rarely released without purpose. And when royal historian Robert Lacey later examined the sequence more closely, comparing official timestamps, public announcements, and the carefully managed media rollout that followed, he reportedly described the handling of the announcement as deceptive, a single word that immediately sent shockwaves through royal circles, not because it proved wrongdoing, but because it introduced something far more dangerous in royal life: doubt. And once doubt enters the story, people begin looking at everything. Not just the announcement. Everything. The hospital. The movements. The photographs. The press access. And perhaps most importantly, what the public never saw. Because for generations, royal births had followed a tradition that was almost sacred. The world waited. The palace confirmed. And then, standing proudly outside hospital doors, the new parents introduced the newest member of the royal family to the public, a moment that connected monarchy, tradition, and people in a single image. Catherine had done it. Princess Diana had done it. Generations before them had embraced some version of the same ritual. But this time, there were no hospital steps, no waiting photographers, no immediate public appearance, no iconic first image, only silence. And then, hours later, an announcement that seemed to place the birth in the future, even though official records suggested it had already happened. Was this simply a modern couple protecting their privacy? Or was this the first sign that the Sussexes were quietly rewriting royal protocol on their own terms? Because what happened next only deepened the mystery. Instead of hospital steps, the world would later be invited somewhere entirely different. Inside Windsor. Inside the carefully controlled setting of Frogmore. And when the cameras finally rolled, everything about that appearance felt deliberate, almost cinematic. The lighting, the positioning, the brief questions, the limited access, the carefully measured smiles. And if the timeline itself raised questions, what people discovered next would raise even more. Because attention was now shifting towards something permanent. Archie's birth certificate. And what appeared there would open an entirely new chapter. Because once historians began comparing every timestamp, every public statement, and every carefully staged appearance, the Archie story moved from unusual to deeply controversial. Attention was now shifting towards something even more official, something filed, something permanent, something that in royal history is supposed to leave absolutely no room for confusion. Archie's birth certificate. And when royal observers began studying the details more closely, fresh questions started emerging. Not about whether Archie had been born. That was never the issue. The questions were about presentation, protocol, and why so many normal royal traditions appeared to have been quietly rewritten. For generations, royal births followed a structure the public understood. The timing was clear. The announcements were direct. The first appearances were symbolic. And the documentation was meant to close the story, not open new chapters. But with Archie, every answer seemed to create another question. Why had the timeline appeared delayed? Why had the press been kept waiting? Why had the first public appearance happened under such tightly controlled conditions? And why did even veteran palace correspondents begin quietly comparing notes behind closed doors? Because inside royal life, small details rarely stay small for long. And once those questions started building, even people inside palace circles reportedly began wondering whether this was simply modern privacy or the beginning of something far more significant.